welcome to Kapow, the web series that got bitten by a radioactive spider back in season 1 and developed the proportionate awesome of an arachnid. I'm Sonya.
And I'm Al. Good intro.
Thank you.
You've probably guessed from looking around that we're at King's Comics today to talk about SpiderMan.
That's right. Amazing Spider-Man 2 has opened at cinemas, so we're going to tell you what we thought about it.
We're also going to have a gander at some notable Spider-Man reboots from amongst his half-century of web-slinging.
And Ray is going to be here to take a look at a bunch of the animated versions as well.
You know, we're getting so many superhero movies coming out at the moment. It's a shame you weren't here for the Captain America special we did last episode.
You didn't tell anyone why, right?
No, you asked me not to, so I didn't tell anyone that you got stuck in a fridge trying to freeze yourself like Captain America. Where's the trust, honestly?
Didn't get any freezy powers or anything. I can't believe you said that. He is clearly a better Spider-Man.
Okay, look, I could maybe see you saying a better Peter Parker, maybe. But there's no way he's a better Spider-Man. I mean, he doesn't have the right body type, he doesn't make with the witty quips.
I totally disagree. And as for being a better Peter Parker, I mean, Tobey Maguire was wrong completely. I mean, he didn't even make his own web shooters.
Whoa. You're saying that Garfield's a better Spider-Man?
Yes!
So was I.
Man, we have to stop jumping into arguments halfway through.
Yeah, we do.
It just makes no sense.
The camera comes on and we
crazy.
just go. You know what? This goes to show you, though, reboots will always cause arguments, even if they're stupid ones. So we're going to take a look at some of the notable reboots that have happened to our favourite wall crawler over the years.
Indeed. Now, we will start by saying we are looking at storylines, so there will be spoilers. Don't say we didn't warn you.
With that in mind, one of the biggest shake-ups in the Spideyverse of late has come with the advent of the superior Spider-Man.
The lead-up to Amazing Spider-Man issue 700 was also the lead-up to a pretty massive event in the Marvel Universe. The death of Spider-Man. For realsies this time.
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
After Dr. Octopus manages to steal Peter Parker's body, leaving his longtime nemesis trapped in his own dying form, we are launched into a tense race against time as Peter tries to get his own body back. Ultimately, he fails, although with the Pyrrhic victory of instilling his power and responsibility rule in his old enemy.
It was a risky move for writer Dan Slott, and a lot of readers were horrified as Otto Octavius started brutalising bad guys and dating Mary Jane. But by the end of the first issue of Superior, we know that Peter Parker may not be gone for good. It ends up being a pretty awesome read.
Now, from the sublime to the ridiculous, we need to look at a rather dark time in the history of Spider-Man. A time when reboots failed to boot. A time of clones.
No, we're not going to talk about Clone Saga.
I'm sorry, but we're talking about reboots, we pretty much have to.
Okay, but keep it brief.
Well, I'll try, but it's hard with an event that went for almost 2 years. It all started in 1975, when Professor Miles Warren, aka the Jackal, created clones of both Gwen Stacy and Spider-Man. During a pitched battle, the clone of Spidey was killed in an explosion. Except that he wasn't.
Yeah, because in 1994, a guy that looks a hell of a lot like Peter Parker shows up, calling himself Ben Reilly. And it turns out that the clone never died and has been doing his own thing this entire time. The original idea was actually pretty cool. It was going to turn out that Riley was the real Spider-Man and Peter Parker was actually the clone.
Unfortunately, the saga was kind of a victim of its own popularity, and in an attempt to wring more sales out of it, they extended the concept way past its original premise, requiring clone after clone and retcon after retcon just to keep it going.
Yeah.
It ended up an overblown mess that made no sense and is remembered as one of the biggest mistakes in comics.
Yeah, so as far as being a reboot, well, actually wasn't one. The idea of Riley taking over as Spider-Man and Parker getting to retire was scrapped, along with the idea that Riley was the original Spider-Man. Again, this was changed in a way that made no sense whatsoever.
Yes, now moving on, gratefully,
Yes.
we come to another kind of reboot, but this time one that works extremely well. Spider-Man Reign, created by Kari Andrews with Jose Villarrubia.
Yeah, it's more of a dark possible future or a what if rather than a reboot, but it does take a look at Spidey in a new way, kind of reminiscent of Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
In future New York, Peter Parker has retired from his wall-crawling ways and has succumbed to old age, as the city he loved has likewise decayed and fallen into corruption around him.
It's pretty grim, isn't it? The Daily Bugle has become a propaganda machine, heavily armed militia types patrol the streets beating up anyone who crosses their path, and something horrible is lurking behind the seat of government. It's only a matter of time before Peter gets pulled back into the conflict.
There are some heartbreaking moments in this book, as well as some great action, and even a few laughs. Because what would Spider-Man be without a few wisecracks?
Tobey Maguire?
Oh, that guy is getting a real pounding in this episode. He wasn't that bad.
No, he wasn't. And you know, it's hard to take up the mantle of such a beloved character as Peter Parker. So, let's take a look at a couple of reboots where someone else ends up doing whatever a spider can. Beginning with a young man named Miguel O'Hara in Spider-Man 2099.
Of the number of characters reimagined for the Marvel 2099 lineup, Spider-Man was probably the most popular. A brilliant geneticist working for a corrupt mega corporation, Miguel gains superpowers when his DNA gets altered and he becomes 50% spider. So, in addition to strength, agility, and spider senses, he undergoes a physical change as well.
Yes, including fanged teeth, talons on his fingers and toes, which are handy for wall climbing but quite awkward if you're on a date, and red eyes that are sensitive to the light.
Miguel also has a different personality to Peter Parker. I mean, he starts off quite arrogant and self-serving, still witty, but with a sarcastic, cynical edge.
Absolutely, but it's not that long before the power and responsibility equation occurs to it.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a nice character journey over this title's 46 issues, 44 of which were written by Peter David. There were a lot of fans that were actually sad to see this title end.
Yeah, which was why it was exciting to see Miguel pop up again in Superior Spider-Man recently.
Absolutely, and with David returning as writer for a new Spidey 2099 series, there has never been a better time to catch up on the original run and bring yourself up to speed.
That's right, but now for our final rebooted and resuited Spider-Man on the block. Ultimate Comics Spider-Man, Miles Morales. When the Peter Parker of the Ultimates universe died during a fight with Green Goblin, there was fortunately already a new web-slinger ready to step into the breach.
Call it luck, call it fate, call it prudent editorial planning. But Miles Morales was bitten by a radioactive spider sometime before Peter's death, and developed a range of powers including camouflage and a venom strike ability, in addition to the usual cocktail of strength, agility, and sticking to things.
I thought it was a neat bit of plotting that Miles becomes a superhero due to his guilt over the death of Spider-Man, thinking that if he had used his powers sooner, he might have actually saved him.
Yeah, it's a nice way of instilling that sense of overriding guilt that every good Spider-Man should have.
And Miles is proving to be a very fine Spider-Man indeed. He's just a kid trying to juggle high school and saving the world while making jokes to keep himself sane. And this is the best kind of reboot because we have an entirely different character with an entirely different background, but all the things that we love about Spider-Man are still there. So there's just a few titles. I hope we've given you some ideas to look out for.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to future reboots and future reimaginings of the character because, I mean, if for nothing else, imagine all the potential spider powers there are out there. I mean, for example, do you know there's this one European spider where after the mother sort of lays her eggs, she looks after the newborn babies for 2 weeks and then they eat her.
Yeah, I can't see that getting into the comics.
Yeah, Marvel have started returning my letters unopened.
That's because you put spiders in them.
It's a visual aid.
People died.
Just an intern.
Hey Ray.
Hey Sonya, hey guys.
So, what is your favourite Spider-Man animated series?
Tough question. I think to answer this properly, we need to swing back to 1967, where it all began. The first animated series was simply titled Spider-Man and ran from 1967 to 1970. After Gantry Lawrence Animation went bankrupt and Ralph Bakshi took over, the show suffered from an extremely low budget. But it did give us the best theme song of all the animated series.
Spider-Man,
Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can.
I loved big, bold, brassy music from back then. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
The voice acting, though, was a little bit rough.
Yeah, bolder than bold. But if absurdity and poor continuity is your thing, you should check this out because you're going to get a bit of a laugh.
Totally. The next one worth mentioning is Spider-Woman,
Yes.
which is still in the Spider-Man canon. It only lasted for one season of 16 eps between 1979 to 1980. She was smart, sassy, tough as nails, and also saves Spider-Man in the Pyramids of Terror episode.
And the series also features more of that big band music that you like as well. I liked her spinning transformation from Jessica Drew to Spider-Woman. It seemed more believable than the time it would take to suit up or strip off for civilian wear. I quite like that series and I do recommend it. It's worth a look. Spidey then returned in 1981. Just titled SpiderMan. This was when Marvel endeavored to bring more of their comic characters to our television screens and entered Ted Schwartz as the voice of Spider-Man. He, for me, was the first to kind of sound true to that character. He had that charismatic charm and that teenage tomfoolery going for him.
But it wasn't as popular as Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
No.
This saw Spidey team up with college friends Bobby Drake, aka Iceman, and Angelica Jones, aka Firestar, who, incidentally, was created specifically for this animation. Later, the series did integrate many of the other characters from the X-Men.
Fast forward to 1994, and another Spidey series is born to accompany the X-Men series on the Fox network. Another great Spidey voice, Chris Barnes. The tempo and animation and action took a big leap with this series. And so too the dialogue, thankfully.
Yeah.
We no longer linger on frames with nothing happening within them or long panning shots of cityscape or open roads. Instead, the story moves at a greater pace as the integration of cinematic storytelling enters the world of animation.
Yeah, there's also a constant inner monologue coming from Spidey, which kind of helps to create tension or comic relief.
Yes.
And it gives you a really interesting psychological insight into the character, which is really important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
On to Spider-Man Unlimited.
In 1999, Fox developed an expanded universe to that of the 1994 series, in which Spider-Man is transported to a counter-Earth. This series was cancelled after one season. For me, the colours were so bold it pushed me away from any kind of reality to this world. And the voice acting was below par, and the action as well was very stiff and stilted. The animation and the characters were just plain ridiculous at times. The web slinging as well and the physics of this world, it was off the mark as well.
The following 2003 series had about as much success.
Yep.
I mean, it came off the back of Sam Raimi's 2002 Spider-Man,
Yep.
and it featured CGI rendered in cell shading. Spidey was voiced by Neil Patrick Harris, who I must admit I quite enjoyed. I thought he did a good Spidey.
Really? I didn't think so.
No?
I think he's got great delivery, good timing, he's very talented,
Yeah.
but I just thought that he brought a maturity to that didn't really suit Spidey. However, they were pushing their limits animation-wise with this one. Some excellent storyboarding and dynamic action are plenty, but I felt disconnected. There was something cold about the world and the characters. I marveled at their technological achievement, but the animation lacked a sense of gravity.
The 2008 Spectacular Spider-Man was an amalgamation of The Amazing Spider-Man and Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man. This series starts to reflect Marvel's Ultimate line, adding more diversity.
Yeah, and the first season follows several storylines that are familiar to avid Spider-Man readers. Plus, it also features a teenage, for the first time, a teenage Spidey, as opposed to all those that preceded it. And this sort of combination breathed new life into our animated hero. Plus, many of the stories were lifted directly from the comics.
Some of the animation isn't as smooth, and Spidey's web slinging defies gravity at some points, but if you can forgive some of these aesthetic flaws, you'll find a really great balance of story and action for comic readers and newcomers.
The series ended on a bit of a cliffhanger though, because the contract between Sony and Marvel ended. Disney felt that much of the content was a little too heavy for its younger audiences.
Yeah, but this in turn gave birth to Ultimate Spider-Man in 2012.
Yes.
Based on the comics by the same name and voiced by Drake Bell, the series is going into its third season. The series depicts Spider-Man becoming the newest member of S.H.I.E.L.D. under the leadership of Nick Fury, on the team with Nova, White Tiger, Iron Fist, and Power Man.
This has to be the slickest animation to date. It features excellent action sequences, freezing frames like panels in a comic, and various onomatopoeic words that smash onto the screen. I generally like the character and landscape design as well.
They also play with camera focus a lot, bringing another visceral level to the action. Not all the voice acting is on form though, and it is very much for younger audiences, I think. I mean, Spidey has a quip or a comic remark like every 10 seconds.
Yeah, it gets pretty tiresome.
Yeah.
And some of the action as well has various hoots, horns, and whistles associated with the impact sounds, and it doesn't sell it too well. Luckily, that's kind of suppressed as the series goes on. Plus, fans haven't been too keen on Spidey breaking the fourth wall, which is another sort of new addition.
Yep.
So, there you have it. That's our rundown of various Spidey animated tunes for you to check out if you like. Marvel are going to be bringing out yet another series in the future. Also, a Guardians of the Galaxy cartoon, which isn't Spidey related, but
it's still cool.
Marvel and it's cool, and yeah, you should keep an eye out for that one. But Sonya, what do you think? Which are your picks over all these series?
My picks would be Spectacular Spider-Man for comic buffs and Spider-Woman for some good old flashback goodness.
Yep.
Plus, my little guilty guilty pleasure is Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends because it's just too kitschy to ignore. Ray?
Ultimate Spider-Man for some awesome action
Yep.
and animation. I do like Spectacular Spider-Man, but my heart kind of belongs to the 1994 Spider-Man. So yeah, let us know what you think if you have your favourite out there.
Yeah.
Now, where were we?
Spins the web, any size,
catches
catches thieves,
just like flies.
Look out!
Look out!
Here comes
There's a
Spider-Man!
Here comes Spider-Man.
Ow!
You okay, Al?
Web shooter didn't go off.
There's a lot of blood.
Some of you may have been lucky enough, like us, to have seen Amazing Spider-Man 2 by now, Rise of Electro. I forgot that point.
Yeah.
Very silly.
Never mind.
Yes, but we're here to share our thoughts on the film.
Yes, but before we do, we need to say that some of what we're going to be talking about is going to be dependent on people knowing some of the background of Spider-Man,
Yes.
specifically regarding his relationships. So
Yes.
if you're coming into this clean, then maybe put it on mute or something.
Major
Or-
spoilers.
Yep, click through to the next part
Yeah,
of
we
our
don't want to spoil
wonderful show.
anything.
And we're good. All right, Sonia, you go first.
Okay, well, look, I love Spider-Man.
Yep.
I think he's fantastic, but I really didn't like this film.
Okay.
My major problem was its pacing. This is so slow and uneven. You've got these massive parts where people are just standing around and talking and there's no Spider-Man and that's not fun. And then you just get short periods of action and cool stuff and then it goes back into the chatting and I actually found myself drifting off and thinking about other things that happen in Spider-Man. I made up my own film in my head.
Was
so
it
that,
good?
It was great.
Yeah.
That kind of annoyed me a little bit. My other problem is with Electro, you know, the rise of Electro.
Sure.
You'd think he'd be a really well-developed, well-rounded character, but he's not. I mean, it starts off, he's really kind of a caricature of a human being. He is your typical kind of stereotypical geek. Like
He's got the comb
He's got the
over.
comb over, he's got the teeth, he's got the bad posture. Not a real person at all, so you really just don't feel anything for him because it's like, well, that's not a real human.
He's just pathetic,
He's just a
basically.
pathetic. He's a pathetic stereotype, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Then he becomes Electro, but I really don't care. I mean, I believe that with a good villain, there is a certain level of empathy that you have for him. You want to know why he does what he does, and that's really kind of dependent on the human he is before he becomes a villain. And for me, Max just was a nothing. He was a no character, a nothing character. Then he becomes Electro, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. There's a few
now
funky
I'm evil.
action. Yeah, I'm really evil, and I want to kill Spider-Man because he took the limelight away from me. And
It's a
I can
pretty
see
weak
where they were,
reason,
but see,
wasn't
I
it?
can see where they were going with that kind of idea, with being invisible, and then all of a sudden everyone is looking at me.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it wasn't done well enough, unfortunately. I kind of went, oh, yep, cool, I see what you're doing.
And he wasn't the only caricature either. If you look at sort of
No.
the evil German scientist with the god-awful accent.
Why
another
was
one
that
as
even
well.
happening? That
It's
was
just-
terrifying.
Yeah.
Is and very evil scientists with
Yes,
the glasses.
with the glasses and the rubber gloves.
Yeah.
But having said that, I thought the CGI in this was amazing. When Spider-Man was actually being Spider-Man, he was really cool. And you kind of got that real great sense of, swinging through with them and flipping around corners. And all the aerodynamics of Spider-Man, I thought were amazingly well done. And the special effects on the webbing was really good. So it's not all bad. I did, once it actually got into being a Spider-Man film and not a Peter Parker film, then I started really enjoying it. But overall, I kind of walked out of it going, oh yeah, cool, that's it, I'm done. Like, it was sad. It was sad for me.
Yeah, it was.
Al?
Well, look, I've got to say, and this is where it's going to get a little spoilerific, so be prepared.
Yep.
But I lay most of the blame squarely at the feet of Gwen Stacy.
Yep.
I don't think they should have honestly had Gwen Stacy in the film. Just jump ahead to MJ. And this is the thing. We know, like most people, I think, by this point, are going to know where the Gwen Stacy relationship is going, how it ends. They're going to know that going in.
Yeah.
And the people making this film seem to be aware of that too, so they're like, okay, we're going to push really hard to make you care about this character.
Yeah.
We're going to push really hard to make you cry at the end of this movie. And they spent way too much time on this
It has the
relationship.
reverse effect,
it just
really.
basically turned into a rom-com with occasional bits of superhero stuff.
True.
And that was why it was tedious for so much of it, especially since you never felt that there was going to be a break between these two.
No.
Even when they were like, no, I'm breaking up with you, but I'm going to just stand over here and keep an eye on you the whole time.
Yeah.
They never felt like they were broke up, so there was no real tension, there was no real pathos. You knew where it was going, so you weren't invested. That was a big part of the problem for me. It really was.
Yeah.
I mean, that said, there was, as with you said, the action is really cool.
good.
When there is some action, it's really cool.
Yeah.
There was that fantastic bit in Times Square
That
when
was
he went
so
into the freeze frame
freeze
to
framing.
kind of show his spider sense.
Yep.
And he does all that cool stuff. And that sort of 30 seconds to a minute that
Was
made
awesome.
up that, if there'd been 500% more of that throughout the film, would have been fantastic. Just drop most of the Gwen Stacy stuff and all the stuff about his parents, which went nowhere and was just boring and pointless, except for a cool action scene at the start.
Yeah.
But that didn't need to be in there as well. Cut straight to the action. Keep with the... It felt like a filler.
Yeah.
That was the problem. This
Yep.
felt like a filler movie. That they sort of, we need to get...
They're looking
This
ahead.
happening.
We've got Gwen here. He needs to know about his parents, so we've got to
She's
get
an
that
obstacle.
out of the way
Yeah.
so we can move on to the rest of the story. We can
Mm.
actually tell the cool stories. And I feel like you look at the things that jump in at the end, you know, new characters who come in near the end.
So
they're going,
cool.
we just want to get to the rest of this story. We want to get to the Sinister Six. We want to get to Venom, and we want to get to Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4.
Yep.
And that's what it felt like. Is like, let's get all
just
of
get
this
all this out of the way.
messy plot stuff so we can get on to the rest of the story. And that just, it felt like a disappointment.
It felt like the relationship between Peter and Harry was much more of the interesting story.
That was
and
really
It
interesting,
was sort of
yeah.
on the back burner. But look, there are some really lovely moments, cinematic moments in the film, but I just didn't. They just stand alone, you know. There's
Yeah.
nothing linking these things together, and that's a bit of a shame. And I thought it was a bit too light as well. I just wonder. I walked out thinking, I didn't enjoy that film, and that film wasn't for me. And I started wondering whether there's going to be something for an older, you know, comic fan or cartoon fan, superhero fan, instead of just, you know, all these films being made for kids. They're so light-hearted. So I'm really
Maybe
questioning.
Days of Future Past or something, hopefully.
You know, I was
Yeah.
saying to a friend the other day, I'm, you know, fingers crossed, but I don't want to have too higher expectations for that
Yeah,
either.
be let down.
Yeah, that's right. The fight scenes and everything else was, you know, it's pretty grand. It's pretty awesome to watch, you know.
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to keep comic fans happy? The fans of the comic?
Well, I'm a fan of the comic and I'm not happy. So, I don't know. I guess because I've read Spider-Man for so long and I like the character, I love Peter, I like all the things that happen and all that, I just got bored, so it really annoyed me. So I don't think it is. I think it's going to annoy a lot of people too.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I think it's probably, I may be wrong here, but they're going to feel the same sort of tediousness as I did. Because you know where the comic's been, this does kind of feel like watching Titanic waiting for the iceberg to show up.
yeah, right.
And that, you know, but a lot of people like that, so
Yeah.
maybe they'll be into it. I don't know, but for
Yeah.
me it didn't really fly.
Yeah, look, it's funny you say that. I think that as well. You know, Garfield's quite a good vessel
Yeah.
to carry this on. I quite like him as an actor. There's something
Yeah,
about him.
yeah.
There's always an energy about him on screen. But I don't think it's enough to carry the hopes and expectations of those who love this comic so much. But for newcomers to Spider-Man, I think they'll be swept away in all
Yeah.
of that. That
fun.
stuff, yeah.
Absolutely.
But,
I
yeah.
almost envy people who have no knowledge of the comics.
Yes.
Because I think they're really going to get something
They're
out
going
of this
to
that
really
we
enjoy
couldn't.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah, that's right. I think so too. But what about I know it's a bit of an odd question, but Stan Lee, are you over his his cameos yet or not?
I love Stan Lee, but I wish his cameos were cleverer.
Right.
Instead of just going, and look, there's Stan Lee!
Yeah.
It's like, yep, that was funny in the first two, but now I want him to be there, but clever.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I tend to agree. Again, you know, Stan Lee, he's the grandfather of Marvel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to give him the respect
Gotta
he's
give him
due.
the props.
But just they're getting less and less inventive of how
Yes.
now they're just going, oh hi, I'm Stan Lee. And that's just how it feels to me, and it pulls you out of the movie, it pulls you out of the story. In the same way that irritating stuff like Peter Parker having a phone that the ringtone is the old SpiderMan tune, that was just bad.
Irritated me every time it went off.
You wouldn't see that in a Batman film.
No.
You know, he wouldn't be like on his phone, would he? No, it just because it doesn't make sense. It's breaking the fourth wall and it shouldn't be in there. And unfortunately, I think the Stan Lee thing is starting to fall into the same category.
Yeah, I agree. It should be more of an Easter egg. There's actually another couple of moments in the film leading into future films that I thought were did pass over as Easter eggs. Oh yes, I see that in the background. That's very interesting. But then they came back to it, and then
and they
focused on this particular element.
You no longer feel clever.
That's
for
right.
Having spotted it.
That's right. Yeah, that on the whole, I think surmises the film is that it didn't make anyone feel very clever at all. It didn't stay ahead of its audience. But anyway, that's what we thought. Leave your comments and tell us what you thought.
And so we come to the end of our web-singiest, wall-crawliest episode to date, and yet there are still so many comic movies to come.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got Sin City, we've got Guardians of the Galaxy, we've got Days of Future Past, we've even got, as much as I hate to mention it, the Michael Bay-produced Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's gonna suck.
It's going to mega suck.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's a lot of other great movies, not to mention great comics, cartoons, and collectibles coming out all the time, so don't let it get you down.
We'll see you next time, guys.
Bye.
Bye.